Let's get in on what God got for us. God got words of blessing, words of hope, words of inspiration, words of life. And this is the time to get in on it at the ground floor before the trouble hit. We have not seen storms and natural disaster like we're gonna see them. We have not seen disease break out like we're gonna see them break out. Ebola, AIDS, and herpes, and syphilis, and gonorrhea, and all the other diseases that took a toll on human life. But when you see all these things pestilent, eating up the crop, we had to come up each year with another remedy to kill a pest, that we can grow grain, that we can grow what we need to grow. But God ordained a word of a blessing to put in the mouth of his preacher, in the mouth of his bishop and apostles and prophets, teachers and evangelists and pastors, that will open up your eyes, that will cause you to survive. Joseph in Egypt had a word of a blessing. God anointed him to see dream and to interpret dream. And through his dream, through his word that he spoke, brought a blessing to Pharaoh and Pharaoh's house and Pharaoh's nation. Joseph was not of the nation of the Egyptian. He was of the house of Jacob, of Israel, of the house of Abraham and Isaac. But yet God sent him down to a nation. And as he sent him down to that nation, he gave him a word of a blessing, that the people could prosper. God gave Pharaoh a dream, and Pharaoh could not interpret the dream. Pharaoh sent for his wise men, his soothsayers, his conjurers, and could none of those interpret the dream. But here a man that was in prison, and he was put in prison by his brothers. A lot of times when you have a word of blessing in you, you're going to be betrayed by your own brother, by your own family, by your own people, because you have a word of a blessing. You're not looking at it as they looking at it. God's showing you things that nobody else can understand, even when you tell them. So they don't understand it, and they mad, and they'll go about to harm you because they can't understand the word of a blessing. God had not gave that to them. So Joseph's brother, his brethren, they played a cruel trick on his daddy and on him. They got him off and slayed a sheep and took the blood back to his father. And they sold him into slavery to the Egyptian. They were going to put him to death, but one of the younger brothers said, "This is our own blood. Let us not do this. At least a worse thing will come upon us." So they sold their brother into slavery because he had a word of a blessing. You have a word of a blessing in you. Don't think this world going to love you. Don't think your brothers and sisters going to love you, but they're going to betray you because you have a word of a blessing. Years went by. God blessed this man in the house of Pharaoh, one of Pharaoh's men, and he liked Joseph. But as Joseph went on and yielded to the word of a blessing in his spirit and in his soul, this man's wife had eyes for him, had designs on it, and she acted on it, and he refused her. He said, "My master done been too good to me for me to play with you and to entertain you in a physical way." So he had to run out of his coat to get away from her advancement because he had a word of a blessing. And as he did that, she framed him, and he landed up again in prison. yet again. Years went by. A few people, the bushel, the cook, I believe, they know it was something about this man that was down in the prison, that they had made, if you will, a jailer or a trustee. And when they had problems, they talked to this man. And this man told them and interpreted their dream. And as he did it, he said, tell Pharaoh. And they said, we'll be sure to tell him. But when they got out, they went back to their own way. They didn't think about him no more. But when Pharaoh was in distress, and the nation of Egypt was in distress, they thought about this man in prison, because all of them about to be put to death because they couldn't answer and interpret the dream. So one of them remember that it's a dreamer down in the jail, a man with a word of wisdom, a word of blessing. And Pharaoh sent and got him, and he interpreted the dream. And the dream was about, it was going to be 7 lean years, and it's going to be 7 hard years. And the man spoke the word of a blessing. God got people today with a word of a blessing in their soul, a word of a blessing in their mouth, and they're not yielding to the advancement of this world, to the advancement of their lust, to the advancement of their desire, to what they see in their eyes that look good to them, but they're yielding to the word of a blessing that is in their soul. And that's what Joseph did when he was in Egypt. He yielded to the word of blessing that was in his soul. And he spoke that word with life, with conviction, and with hope. And the nation of the Egyptians were blessed and prolonged, and God kept them from destruction. Today, when we hear the word of a blessing and give an ear to it, God will keep us from disease. He'll keep us from Ebola. He'll keep us from pestilence. He will keep us from natural disaster that is plaguing our society. See, man, ever since the garden have had trouble, have had hardship, and have had disappointment. But God always will raise up a person, whether a woman or man, and put the word of a blessing in them, and they'll stand up in the most troubled time that was known to man. Daniel did that. He stood up in one of the most troubling times for the nation of Israel when they were in captivity in Babylon. And he stood up. When the Persian took it, he stood up. Whoever came against him, when Darius, the Greek, took it, he stood up because he had a word of a blessing in his soul. And his people prosper because of the word of the blessing. Give your ear to the word of a blessing that coming through your computer, that coming on your Facebook page, that coming in your ear. Ear hustle the word of God and let it become life in your soul. Let it become life in your mind. Let it become a word of a blessing to your family. Your family that is plagued by drugs, plagued by unemployment, plagued by poverty. Let the word of a blessing break the yoke. It always have took a man with a word of a blessing, a woman that possessed a word of a blessing. You listen to it on a daily basis. They always sent for it. They had in the days of old, they had soothsayer and fortune teller. People that could predict the future, see the future. You had conjurers, people that could conjure up things, and they call them conjurers. You had heralds, people that took you a message, that would stand up and proclaim unto you, thus said the Lord, or thus said the King, or thus said the Great One. You have always had this in the earth. But God trumped it all with a word of a blessing, with a word of life, with a word of hope, with a word of salvation. Jesus brought a word of salvation in a troubled time when he came on this earth. We wonder why he didn't come now with the knowledge of Facebook, YouTube, or the social media, would it not have been a better time to come? He came in a time that you could not say. Your knowledge did this. Your knowledge brought you salvation. Your knowledge brought you hope. Your knowledge brought you blessing. He came in a time that man couldn't take credit for the miracle of God, for the healing, for the dead being risen, and for Jesus dying on the cross and bringing salvation. Perhaps if he had died in this time, they would have said it was trick cameras and the man didn't really die. He didn't really get wounded in his side. He didn't really have a crown thorn on the head because they could use trick camera. But in the time that he came with a word of a blessing, a word of hope when they did not have hope. And he sent men after him that can bring this message down through the generation, down through the ages, that they could bring a word of a blessing. I would beseech you to give an ear today and let the word of a blessing enter into your heart, enter into your eardrum, and let it bring forth fruit in you, fruit of deliverance, fruits of salvation, fruit of hope, fruit of overcoming. If we ever needed to overcome, if we ever needed a preacher with a word of a blessing, we need it now. We need a man, a woman that'll stand up and not worry about what it look like, not worry about what it sound like, not worry about what's in the news, how much tragedy, how much evil, how much chaos, how much destruction, how much disappointment coming, how many storms traveling and destroying everything that you done worked for. But in the midst of all of it, as God raised Jesus Christ up from a baby in a manger and sent him out into the world, and at 30 years old, he began to preach a gospel that never man saw on the face of the earth. Began to do work from heaven that man have never seen upon the face of the earth before Christ. Been able to manifest God in such a way that the common man can possess him. You know, anytime you get something good, great, anything valuable, anything full of hope and promise, the rich folk get it. The prosperous people get it. The who's who get it. But God sent a common man in a common way, in a manger, and sent him to the whole world. And this man came working with his hand, had cattle and corns on his hand, had cattle and corns on his feet, because he had to walk in the sand. He had to climb ladders. He had to tote his llama up to put it where he needed to put it. His beam, his rafter, his plates, he had to set them all in place, and he did it with his hand. Whatever mechanism they had to help level it off and hold it up while he nailed it and put it in place, he had to do it. But he was a common man. We today in our generation society, we don't like common people. We don't like the lit man. We don't like the man that work with his hand, the woman that work with her hand, the people that come from the earth and live off the land. We want people from corporate America, from corporate Europe, people that got degrees, people that got social status, people that came from family with education and degrees. Excuse me. But we don't want people with the word of a blessing that can see down in your heart and see when you're troubled, see when you upset, see when you lost all hope. God done sent his people with a word of blessing. Give an ear to that man that witnessed to you on your job, that witnessed to you on the lake when you fishing. Give an ear to that person that walking down the road with you, that witnessed to you. You riding in their car, they riding in your car. Give an ear to the word of a blessing and see will your life not change. You know how you get delivered? When a man or woman come preaching Jesus, come talking about hope, come talking about salvation, share it on the job, then you get saved, you get delivered, and you able to go back to your family. That's what Jesus did. After he raised from the dead, he was walking down the road. Two men got with him. He began to share with them certain things. They began to share with him what had happened in the last day or two. How a man was put to death that say he was the Christ, that say it was hope going to be in his blood. And after him, salvation was going to come to the Jews. And they listened as this man walked. But they didn't understand that this was the Jesus, the man with a blessing in his word. And he looked at the people as they walked a little piece. And they say, this Christ, they shouldn't have killed him. He said, be quiet, you slow of heart. Do you not yet understand what this man did, work your salvation? What this man did brought life to you. What this man did on that cross that you all talking about brought hope to you. And he had a word or a blessing when he was walking this earth. Give an ear to such a man and you'll be delivered. Give an ear to such a man and your family be saved. I'd like to get ready to close with this. Back during the day of Joshua, Moses and them, when they went to take over Jericho, they sent spies out to survey the land, to see what was going on. And as they did, those men went to a house of a harlot, Rahab the harlot. She was a whore, a prostitute, a madam. And when they went to her, they told her what was going on. And she said, look, I believe in your God. I believe you have a word of hope, a word of wisdom. And I've been following the news throughout the land, how y'all been conquering everything because of a word of a blessing. So now, I will hide y'all from the soldiers and from those that will do you harm, if you will protect my house and my family when you take the city. And they made an agreement, and she hid them. And when they came to take the city, they remember they vowed to this woman. She was ready and she did what they agreed to do, the covenant they made with each other. And so when they came, they took the city. Because of a word of a blessing in Joshua, this lady was delivered. Because she gave her ear to what the man said. Give an ear, generation, to the word of a blessing that you hear through social media. Give an ear to the men and women of God that he done raised up. Everybody is not, everybody have not sold out to the devil and been conquered by the devil. You got people that done stood the test, and they can bring you a word of a blessing, a word of life, a word of hope. You scared for your kids. You worried about how your kids gonna fare on the school campus, how they gonna fare when they get in the job market. You worried about how your parents gonna be when they get old, and how they gonna be taken care of. Listen to a word of a blessing, and a word of a blessing will bless your family, bless your kids, bless your generation, bless your home, and it'll bless your church. It will bless your life and add days to your life. It'll add hope to you and salvation to you. And it'll give you strength and courage to face what the enemy is doing in this hour. The enemy do not have power over God and do not dictate the agenda of God. Only God dictate what he gonna do. And he have a word of a blessing for those that will yield themselves and open their heart. I beseech you today, open your heart to the word of a blessing.